The State Commission of Inquiry into the Mount Meron tragedy of 2021, Israel's worst civilian disaster in which 45 people were killed, now issuing warnings to a number of top officials in the government that they may be held responsible. And chief among the list is former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Joining me to discuss is founder and CEO of the Yad Le'olim organization and former member of Knesset with the Yesh Atid party, Rabbi Dov Lipman. Rabbi, thank you for being with us now. The commission states that as Prime Minister for over 12 years, Netanyahu knew or should have known about the risks at Mount Meron, especially as multiple state offices and even previous governments issued multiple warnings. Netanyahu, meantime, is essentially saying that he wasn't aware of these warnings because, as Prime Minister, he was busy looking at the macro issues and put others in charge of such events. What do you think of this reasoning?
So I had the unfortunate task of being closely involved with many of the families immediately after the Meron disaster and tragedy. And I was involved in helping them get into the country, involved in some of the memorial services, funerals. And I was there on that Friday when they were identifying bodies at the National Morgue. These families need to see leaders who are taking responsibility for what happened. I'm not getting into what should the ramifications be, what should the consequences be, but when you're people who are either citizens of the Jewish state or you sent your children to study in the Jewish state from abroad, you want to know that the leaders of that Jewish state are willing to take responsibility when a catastrophe of this kind happens. And I think that is the important step that is coming from these letters, is that hopefully it'll begin a process where some of these leaders will look into the camera and say, I apologize because I made a mistake. I wasn't as focused on this as I should have been. And that's what I know the families and probably the broader country as well is very much waiting to hear.
All right, now, in addition to Netanyahu, former Public Security Minister Amir Ohana, Israel Police Chief Kobi Shabtai, and former Northern District Police Chief Shimon Levy is also receiving warnings. What kind of punishments might actually come of this?
So it's going to be very interesting to see if there's any actual criminal prosecution that comes from it. I believe it's unfortunate that given the election season, people are turning this into some kind of a political spin in either direction, meaning I wouldn't want to say Netanyahu and Likud's opponents using this to say, don't vote for them because look how they failed. But at the same time, I don't want to see Netanyahu and the Likud doing what they're doing, which is saying this is all politics and it's all to impact the elections. This is a real tragedy that took place with 45 people who lost their lives. And there are benefits of being in leadership positions where you get a lot of praise when a lot of good things happen. So if there are peace deals that are made and the economy is doing great, you can take credit for it. But then when there are moments like this that take place and a commission has taken the time to study it and has said, yes, there are faults with various people, they need to stand up and take responsibility. What the consequences are in terms of people losing their jobs, in terms of what happens in the elections, that I want to remove from the equation for the moment. But I know that people just want to hear someone say, yes, I take responsibility. We have to do better the next time, and here's how we're going to do that.
Do you think that the commission or the powers that be would maybe give more leniency in terms of punishments should Netanyahu and other leaders take that step and take responsibility?
I think that'll play a role. You see this very often, and even in regular court situations, where very often a person standing up and taking responsibility does have an impact in terms of the consequences. And I certainly hope that will happen. There's also a country that's seeing its greatest civilian disaster go without any kind of consequences really anywhere, except for one minor person who stepped down from a position in terms of the positions that we're talking about. I do think it absolutely could have an impact because the first step in knowing that we're going to prevent this from happening in the future is people taking responsibility, saying this is where things went wrong and this is where things have to change. I don't know that people are looking just for punishment. I don't think that's the goal. I think the goal is let this not be for naught and let's learn from it. And part of that is the pipeline of leadership, from the prime minister to the ministers to the other people that are involved, recognizing where their mistakes were made and actually acknowledging that they had these failures. So, will the criminal prosecution system pursue people? I'm not in that realm to know exactly where that might apply. If
Right.
it does apply, they absolutely should. If there are people who are supposed to be criminally held responsible for it. And if not, then it shouldn't be that way. Meaning, like I said, all politics should be removed from it. It should be dealt with based on the facts and let the chips fall where they may.
So in an interim report released last November, the commission recommended a cap on the number of participants allowed in the festivities in the future, a single central location for a bonfire lighting ceremony, and the appointment of a minister who would oversee this event. Is that enough?
It's definitely a really important start. In other words, the question is, where's the starting point? Is the starting point that the tens of thousands of people, or even more, hundreds of thousands of people have to be allowed to go there? Or is the starting point, let's make this safe, let's be smart, and let's build out based on that? You can study the history and see where Lag BaOmer, where this day fits into our life cycle events. And it's not very high. I'm not diminishing from the meaning that it has to people, but at the same time, if we reduce the numbers, if we change the way that it's done, it's not like we're altering the way a religious service has been done for thousands of years.
All right, Rabbi Lipman, thank you so much again.
Thank you.